Welcome to Tabletop. We're gonna redo that.
Perfect.
Welcome to Tabletop Talk. We're your hosts, Kyle
And Jeremy.
and our guest hosts today are Rick and Treven, as well as our editor and part-time speaker, Christopher. Here at Tabletop Talk, we discuss opinions on board games, card games, and tabletop role-playing games. This is our second episode, and today we're going to be talking a little more about memories and favorite moments, as well as character builds. So yeah, how's everyone doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm here to talk about D&D, tabletop games. Why would I be in a bad mood?
What about you? Yeah, what about you guys?
Yeah, I doing really good. Excited to be here for episode 2.
Woo!
Yeah, it's always fun when you get together, and
Yeah.
especially when you get to nerd out and talk about games and D&D and all sorts of good stuff. So I'm definitely jazzed.
So Rick is also one of our main guest hosts who comes on. He wasn't able to make it on the first episode, but we're glad to have him here with us today.
I was here for the unreleased, very bad audio episode. But
The Session Zero episode.
our practice episode.
That one will be released on Patreon.
Yeah.
It'll come out about the same time Treven finishes the OF account.
I mean, next week?
Yeah, no, okay, yeah.
I'm getting
Looking forward to
it.
All right. So how's your guys' week been? It's been about a week since we met up.
Yeah, I have something. So I actually found this cool study was done in Berlin, and it was this research article about people who play D&D, and they found that looking at 800 people, 400 of which play D&D, they showed actually a statistically significant higher scores in extrovertedness and open to try new experiences and play in the people who played D&D compared to the people who didn't. And the most exciting, this is the last little thing, is they actually saw a correlation between someone's score in their extroversion and then tied with the charisma score of their person's character. So I thought that was really cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
What the heck, Treven? What? That is not on the card at all. You just come in with a mind-blowing study that I'm supposed to ignore because this is our little intro chit-chat. And let's throw that on the back burner. Oh my gosh.
I did say in the first episode, like, Treven is like a low-key genius and all. This is what I was talking about when I said our first game that Treven came to join us. Me and Jeremy, we were ready, like, hey man, anything you need help with? We're expecting him to like go, so how do I attack? What die do I roll? And no, the guy's coming out like, hey, so can I combine this spell with this spell to like do an area effect and this? And we're like, what are you talking? Like, that is like, we're talking like calculus in D&D. Awesome.
No, in all honesty, please send me that study immediately.
And I was pretty excited about it. I thought it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. So there we go. You learn something new every day. So yeah, what about you, Rick? What about your week?
Oh, I got over being sick, so
Ooh, that's not good.
Yeah, no, it was a rough week last week, but I did get to travel before then.
Oh, nice.
And I'm pretty sure that's what sparked getting sick.
Where'd you go?
Family went to Colorado.
Okay.
Down to Denver, which was exciting. It's very interesting going there because it's not as long as a flight as you would think it would be, because you're landing 5,000 feet higher in elevation than anywhere else.
Oh
so
my God.
We were like, okay, sure. So we got like another 45. Oh, we're already starting to like land. Okay, I guess. And then you're like, oh, we've already landed. Like, this is nuts.
It's beautiful flying over Colorado too. My brother lives in Mississippi, so
Okay, yeah.
I've gone over it a couple times, and every time, man, it's just like, this is the most gorgeous part of the trip.
Yeah. Yeah. Got to visit a board game store when I was down there too. So that was kind of cool.
Ooh, there we go.
Oh yeah. All
You got to do that.
Bunch of people were playing, but so I was with my son, so we didn't get to stop that long. But it was a lot smaller than our local board game store here in town. So it was really neat. It was really cool to kind of go to this. It was in Golden, Colorado, so like where Coors is like everything. But it was really neat to be like in this really like rogue town, and here's a nice little game store.
Isn't it interesting? Because when I travel, I do the same thing. How you have these favorite things that you do at home, and then you go somewhere else and you do the same things. For instance, I just got back from New Zealand last month with my wife, and we ended up going to like 4 different thrift stores while I'm there. And that's something I love thrifting, and and so it's crazy. You're like, oh yeah, we went to Colorado, went to this cool board game store, Highlight, and you're like, oh yeah, we have board game stores here, board game stores there. I just love how no matter where you go, you find yourself doing some things and enjoying that area's version of what you like at home.
Well, it's like your Thai food analogy. You know what you want.
Yeah.
No, I did the same when I did a trip that was with my wife all around Washington. I stopped at like every game store in Washington, and there were a lot of really cool ones. But yeah, so I guess we'll get to the first question of the night here. So for the first one, what was your first encounter with D&D? I know a lot of us are in our early to mid 30s. So we grew up with the Satanic Panic. That a lot of our parents were either really like anti a lot of like media things at the time, or they just didn't care either way. But who would like to go first? What was your first encounter with like Dungeons and Dragons?
I will, because I remember the Satanic Panic, and like that's the trippiest part of watching like Stranger Things. And I think it's the end of season 2 or maybe season 3 where they have like the fake news coverage in the news stories where they're talking about like, oh, and all of this is blamed on Dungeons and Dragons. It's like, it wasn't like I never really got to be around it that much as a kid. You weren't in it. This is what it could cause. It could cause fissures to open up in the earth in like demogorgons. It's like, yep, I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, it's scientifically proven.
Yeah. So, my first playing with D&D was in middle school. I remember a couple friends of mine, it was after like a sports season, or like it was football, and I wasn't going to play football. And they're like, oh no, we're going to go play board games and it was a tabletop club. And so I got to go through a bunch of cool stuff. And I only remember distinctively a few things from that club back then, but one of them was that the most popular character in the entire game was based on a Greek hero, and his name was Testicles.
Oh, of course it was.
Yes, because we were 12. And every time the character died, and one of the other players would pick that character back up. So he would never go away. It was fantastic.
Testicles, the man who could get kicked in the balls 1,000 times and still be. Oh my God.
I'll follow. This is Jeremy. I started playing D&D with my oldest brother, who's 10 years older than me, and he DM'd for us, and it was just one session only. And I'll get into more of the reason why in a later episode of why it was one session only. But that was my first experience, and it was just like, oh, okay, this is fun. You can kind of play pretend. You can choose to do whatever you want. And then after that, the next time I played tabletop D&D, that was when I was in elementary school. The next time I played tabletop D&D was probably when I was in 8th or 9th grade. But right in between those were when I was playing like the Baldur's Gate like games.
Oh, okay. Yeah. How old were you when your brother introduced you to it?
I must have been 4th grade, I think.
4th. Okay, so pretty early on then.
Yeah, it was 4th or 5th grade.
Okay.
It was fun. I remember having fun, but then at the end being both frustrated and bewildered.
That sounds about right for a 4th grader.
Yeah, and so that was my first experience. My brother, 10 years older than me, decided to just DM a session, which, if I was in, 4th grade, he must have only been, 18 to 20 or something like that. I'm not going to do the math right now, but that's pretty cool.
Well, and that would be then like, oh man, that'd probably be like 3rd edition, not even 3.5, thinking about it.
Oh, yeah. And depending on what he had, too, it might have been one that he bought that was
like 2nd or something. And the rules then were way more complicated. I cannot imagine trying to teach a kid how to play that. What about you, Treven?
It was first time being around it would have been around like 98, so I would have been 11 and playing Baldur's Gate. That was like my first with like the Sword Coast and getting introduced to all that. But actual like Dungeons and Dragons, I still remember this being like 13 or 14 and in Barnes and Noble going through all like the manuals and the games, and I didn't have people who wanted to play or wanted to do it, but I was like, yeah, this is so cool. And like literally since then, it took me up until almost 37 now until I started my first campaign. But yeah, that was my first time playing the video game adaptations.
There we go. Yeah. Well, I'm happy that you did start playing and all. For me, it definitely was. Let's see here. I'd say it was actually like second or third grade. I used to have, before I understood what Warhammer was, I had like a few Lizardmen models that like a friend had traded me for some, because I don't know if you guys ever did this. I know Jeremy had to have, because we went to Kibler together. But there were kids that would trade like sometimes little toys, but they were always like little minis or something weird that wasn't like a big thing. And this kid, he traded me then some for the Lizardmen that I had, and I got like this cool little goblin thing. And my neighbor came over and he started freaking out. Keeping in mind, he's like 2 years younger than me at the time. So I'm in second or third grade. He's like a first grader or something. And he starts going like, my mom says that's the stuff of the devil. He takes the mini and he breaks it in front of me. And he then tries to burn it with a match, because for some reason in the 90s, every other kid had a match. Nobody smoked, but they all had matches and all. And I remember being so pissed because I like traded away one of my favorite like minis before I even knew how to play Warhammer or anything like that. But then from there, I think my first real understanding of Dungeons and Dragons was Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance for the PlayStation 2. That couch co-op where you got to sit with buddies, me and my friend Sean. Me and him and his brother would play it literally every like 4 out of 7 days a week. It was so much fun, easily the best game ever, and got me so into D&D.
That's cool. Yeah, credit to Baldur's Gate.
I was just gonna say, definite credit to Baldur's Gate. It's come a long way. Like to win Game of the Year,
Yeah, the new 3. Yeah,
makes D&D like cool, which is arguably probably for the longest time one of the biggest things against D&D is that it never got to sit at the cool table ever. And for it to win for a version of D&D to win Game of the Year at the Video Game Awards is massive. And there are people who probably have no idea that they're playing Dungeons and Dragons while playing Baldur's Gate and having a blast and learning all of the mechanics. And then when they get turned around and they're going to sit at a table and someone's going to be like, hey, you guys want to play a campaign? And they're like, I think I might know. Oh, I do know how to play. And boom, they're in as Baldur's Gate. And there's going to be generations of
It's really turned my wife around. Honestly, she went from like occasionally playing like one shots with Jeremy and Chris and me from every now and then to now she's like, look, I know I don't usually want to play these things, but you mind if I give it a try with you guys sometime again? And I was like, yes, please.
Well, yeah, and I just think with that game made it kind of more accessible, or at least make it seem more accessible for a lot of people, because I've seen the same thing, which is awesome.
It's really cool. And I don't know if you guys started, what Baldur's Gate you guys started on. I started on Baldur's Gate 2, which was shortly after I started Dark Alliance and all. I got it for the computer, and I will tell you now, that game infuriated me because it was so hard and I had no idea what I was doing and all.
I've never played Baldur's Gate. I played Diablo. Which,
okay, it's not too different, honestly.
No. And I played a lot of 2, like everybody did, who didn't have like a big console like in like the early 2000s. But played quite a bit of 3 as well. I haven't played 4 yet, but I need to play Baldur's Gate, considering all of my friends play Baldur's Gate.
You've got it, man. It's so good. Baldur's Gate 3 is.
As a side note on your, Diablo, you should check out, if you haven't played yet, Rick, because you and your son would like it, Minecraft Dungeons. It's basically like,
oh my God.
It's like playing Diablo in a Minecraft setting. It's super fun. You feel like you're in a Godfather's arcade.
Yeah, Jeremy brought it over to my house, and I have been so mad he hasn't brought it over since. No.
Excellent. I'll have to do that because I don't think I'd be able to get away with letting my son play Diablo with me. He's 4, so
That might be a little difficult.
Things might not fly, but Minecraft probably could.
All right, well, moving on here, I think since we're getting really into this, let's get to our second question, which is, does anyone have a favorite memory that really has stuck with them? And if so, I was just curious, does it affect your gameplay at all to this day? Now, I know some of you guys, being Rick and Treven, are a little new to the actual tabletop versions of these. Jeremy, you've been playing for a long time, so let's start with you.
Okay, yeah. So first off, Kyle, I have a ton of good memories with you, and they'll probably come up on this podcast. I'm going to do a different one from a different DM. This was when I was playing a bard, and one of the flaws of this bard and character creation was that I'm a sucker for a beautiful face, right? And it's kind of just like a joke. You're like, oh, I'm a sucker for a beautiful face, right? And then it was somewhere in our session that I decided to make that a serious thing. And I talked to my DM, and I was like, can we create maybe some sort of percentage die on how beautiful the person I'm talking to is, and it will affect my rolls in a positive or negative way?
Was it possibly like a scale of 1 to Chris's beauty? Because Christopher is the most beautiful man on this podcast.
Thank God you said it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, someone had to say it.
On the percentage dice, it went from 0 to Chris. No, so anyway, it was so goofy, and it was so funny because at one point there was me and our barbarian, who was just a low charisma, low intelligence barbarian, who we became pals. And anytime I'd go to perform, he'd also go to perform.
Of course.
Right? With 0 performance, right?
Best buddies, man.
So then I remember this one moment where we were going to interrogate someone at this estate, right? And it was going to be, and then a woman opens the door, and I rolled, and it was like a 99 or 100, right? And my DM just goes, "You're speechless. This is the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. You've thought about this happening, but it has not happened until now."
So you met Helen of Troy.
Basically. And then all the interrogation went to my barbarian. And it was so funny. And the reason I love that is because it was one of the big moments for working with your DM and not seeing your DM as the enemy and the DM seeing you as enemy, but seeing it as hey, let's figure out how to make this new adaptation work for more fun.
That's awesome. And I mean, especially because I think there's a lot of people out there who view it as the players versus the DM. And there's a lot of DMs who view it as DM versus players. And this is a co-op game. You are meant to be having fun. You're telling a story with your best friends. Which of you guys would like to go first?
I'll go
second, I guess. Yeah.
I would say my favorite memory is the way and manner in which I learned that D&D is all about action and consequences.
Okay.
And the freedom that you have of choosing to literally do whatever you want. And then the DM decides how that affects the board, how it affects the game, how it affects the dungeon. But this is the middle school tabletop group, the 12-year-old boys who came up with testicles.
Man, I wish I had gone to school where you went.
So we were in a dungeon, and this kid was a scout or something. He somehow, his initiative always rolled high. He always had to go first. And we were in a hallway, and the teacher was like, "All right, so you go first. What do you want to do? What is your action?" He's like, "I'm going to pee."
Oh,
We're
no.
No. Yeah, I want to pee. There's a wind and a breeze coming through the dungeon. I want to pee into the wind. And we were all just like, what? Number one, it was the funniest thing that we'd ever heard in our entire lives because we were 12. Number two, we were like, what is this going to do? And so he peed into the wind and activated a pressure-sensitive switch on the side of the wall, and spikes came out of the wall, killed the whole room, and we reset the dungeon.
I'm sorry, that's just
It was wonderful. It was the teacher getting really upset that was how we started this dungeon. So we just reset everything. But there's consequences.
I was gonna say that's a great consequence right there. What? Oh my god. What about you, Treven? How do you follow that up?
I don't know. Can I just pass? No, I have a really good one. So, I mean, for my short time playing, but was just recently, like probably like 2 or 3 months ago. So you were the DM. It was like the final game of this campaign. We go in here. And then there's this, you describe this monster, and I'm still kind of new. I thought it was a beholder. Turned out later it was just a watcher, but similar. And so I'm like ready. I'm like going through all my items, seeing my spells, what spell slots say, and then I'm like, okay, like let's do this. So the group's ready, and you're like, and as that monster, you're like, make me a cup of tea, and we all start panicking. Like, I wish I had a heart monitor. I could see like all the popular.
Oh, you meant the spectator.
The spectator.
Yeah, the spectator.
Sorry,
okay.
Spectator.
I was like, watcher. What watcher did I have? And then you mentioned the tea, and I remember this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I wish I had a heart monitor like you see on those speed runners or something, because it was legitimately, I was sitting there like, gee, like what's going on? Like this is a trick question. And all of us are together. We're like looking through our bags, like, hey, do you have anything you can use as tea? The druid is like, hey, I can probably boil something up, heat water, and all this. And it was just in such a little thing, but like legitimately, I was like feeling it, like, and yeah, it was just one of those so small, but just a really cool experience.
I remember that. I think David also, who was playing with us, thought it was a beholder too. So I described to them that there's this just bobbling like creature just floating in the air with 4 tendrils and eyes sticking out, one big eye, and it's just listing lazily around. And it's just, hello there. And they all start like panicking, like, Treven's the only one in the room with me at the time, because we were playing this online, but there was this, it was so loud how quiet everyone went. And that says something, because Jeremy and actually everyone here has played with David before. Love the guy, but he loves to talk and hear his own voice more than Jeremy and me, and that says a lot.
That does.
But yeah, this thing just sat there and was talking about how it didn't have like any company for like almost 100 years now, and it was almost done with its servitude. And so it asked if anyone had tea. They're like, I can physically see Treven's heart hitting of his like coat that he was wearing and all.
And then you kept switching up. You'd be like, don't touch anything. Like if we started to get close to, we were like looking around the room, and just, yeah, it was my first time experiencing something like that in a D&D game. So my answer might change a few years down the road, but that was really cool.
And
man, if you want to create panic in a party as a DM, tell your party not to touch anything.
Oh, that was exactly it.
Oh my God,
he flipped between like angry to all of a sudden just nonchalant, and then when they finally made him tea, he asked what was tea.
Perfect. Wasn't David sent out of the room?
Yes, he was. He said, all right, bye, after he made tea, and then he'd occasionally pop his head back in. Before I get to mine, Chris, you mentioned you had a few memories.
Yes.
I'll take either one. Sorry, we gotta pass the mic again. All the power.
So my first one is an obvious one. Kyle, because he DM'd this one. It was Arvelbeer. He was an
this was 3.5.
Yeah. And I remember he ended up dying a very heroic death because everyone else around me was getting bludgeoned and everyone was trying to escape because they're like, we can't fight this thing. It was what? Bug.
It was a bugbear, and you guys were, I think, only like level 2 at the time, and in 3.5, the rules for like bugbears were way harder than they are in 5e. 5e bugbears are almost a common thing at this
Everything
point.
was harder in 3.5.
Yes.
So I ended up, I chose to keep Arbiter there so everyone else could escape. And he ended up dying. Everyone was able to escape. But that moment for me was, personally, it was like I did something in the ending that was worth so much.
Well, didn't you also roll like 2 nat 20s in a row?
Yeah, and that never happened.
No, I was like, so Chris, like throughout that whole campaign, he kept rolling like ones and he could not roll above a 10 to save his life. And he was getting really flustered. And I made even a magic bow for him that was a bow of reshot. So it would allow him to roll the bow twice. It basically was advantage in 5e.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a thing in 3.5. And it helped a little bit, but then I don't know what happened. He wasn't even using the bow against this bugbear, and he just was going to town on it. Everyone else, all of a sudden, it was like he gave them his luck, and he stole all of their luck. And this thing was like wailing around, and it had a lot more special rules to it in 3.5, where it could do like a whirlwind attack, where it would spin its morning star and hit everyone around it. And I don't know how Arvaldir did it, but he just dominated. And I mean, people at the end were legit cheering his name and all as he dropped.
Where's the statue?
Well, there would be no statue because like at the end of that game, essentially rocks fell and everybody died.
Cool.
Or in a more literal sense, they got stampeded by a bunch of vampires spawn on horses.
Cool.
Yeah, it became just a little too chaotic. I was still too new to DMing, and the pressure hit hard. I mean, Jeremy was there for one of them, and they killed him when I brought him in as a guest guy to help them. We'll probably talk about that in the DM one as well as in players. But as for me, my favorite memory actually is a more recent one. So I've got a lot of memories to go off of, but the most recent one is I started a game with my 3-year-old. And I know what you're thinking. 3-year-olds, there's no way. But she's actually got it down. I kind of made a simplified version of 5e, which is crazy to think you could go more simple on it. But we ended up at this point where she and my wife both have characters in it that are Mama and Shadowheart. So anyone who plays Baldur's Gate 3, my kiddo has seen us play, and I could not convince her to make her own character name. She kept insisting she must be Shadowheart. And I don't blame her. Shadowheart's awesome.
Good for her.
Yeah. So they ended up waiting because there was this dwarf who was a friend of theirs who was meant to come and give them all haircuts. So like in this game, we normally do a lot of just like farm work, and I do little problem solving things. So not real combat or anything. Her character is meant to be 6 and whatnot. And my character is just a DM PC who shows up every now and then, and he's at the house and he says, "Hey, I'm gonna wait here for our friend to get here. Do you guys want to go down the road and see if you can find him?" They go down, they follow a will-o-wisp, which leads them to these goblins that are kind of reoccurring characters. It's just basically a Larry, Curly, and Moe situation. If I remember right, it's Skit, Scat, and Bob.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah. So these goblins had him tied up by their fire, and they're arguing how they're going to cook him. Well, my wife was pretty gung-ho on the idea of, well, what do you think? Should we charge right into there and fight them, or should we be sneaky? And I was really proud of my daughter. She said she wanted to be sneaky, and so they actually snuck around to the back of the camp, and I gave them a moment to where I described all their belongings, and I basically said these goblins had like nothing. You look through, they've got no food, they've got like holes in their blankets, their tents aren't even properly built. These 3 don't seem like they're doing very good very often, and I left it up to them, and after talking about it, my daughter pretty much decided that they should go in and make a deal with these goblins. So they snuck back to the entryway so that they wouldn't spook the goblins. And she came up, and they only had like 2 eggs, but there's 3 goblins, and the goblins are always trying to steal the eggs. That's kind of the big thing in it that's a constant joke with them. But she ended up deciding to trade the 2 eggs for the dwarf, and they succeeded in it. But the way they got away with it was by convincing the goblins that 2 is definitely more than 3. And luckily they're goblins, so, and it's a little kid's game, so I know Treven and his boys are planning on joining at some point here.
Absolutely, I can't wait.
And I've told Chris that if he ever wants to bring his kids over to play, they can do it as well. Yeah, but that's pretty much where we left off.
That's really cool.
But
Really, really cool.
I like the ingenuity of sneaking, and then obviously the convincing goblins that 2's better than 3. I love that.
yeah,
Love
yeah.
that.
Well, and it's a lot of fun seeing her be more compassionate on some of the decisions, because they could have easily beat these goblins. I've given them enough things, and I obviously fudge the rolls enough that the story works. But looks like we're about up on time now, so thanks you guys for coming out. And that's about all the time we have left for today at Tabletop Talk. And if you enjoyed this, like and subscribe on whichever app you are using to listen to us for more content. You can also find our TikTok account under TabletopTV LLC and TT Talk Pod on X, where we will be unleashing several shorts and previews for the YouTube channel, also named Tabletop TV, both of which will be linked in the description. Until our next adventure, stay safe, friends, and we love you. Tabletop Talk, out.
Yeah!